We'll do a review in the Kutas Sichas in Chelek Tezvav. This is the third Sicha for the Parshas Noach. In this Sicha, the Rebbe will explain why is it that we are so against, the Torah is against a non-Jew making a Shabbos, resting on a Shabbos. As the Rebbe will bring out, it's not only resting on the seventh day, on our Shabbos, but B'chlal making Shabbos. The Rebbe will explain also what took place between before the Mabul and after the Mabul, how we see different matters in the world that became either stronger or weaker, and also how this all relates to the discussion, as we will see. Aleph. From the pasuk v'yom v'layla lo yishbaisu, the pasuk talks about after the Mabul. The Torah says that all the seasons will continue, and day and night will not rest. The Gemara. So the Gemara learns from this pasuk that akum sheshavas chayav misa, that a non-Jew who rests on Shabbos, he is liable for death. He deserves death. Shenemar. The pasuk says, "V'yom v'laylo lo yishbais." Since the pasuk says that day and night it shall never rest. So this is talking about literally. It's talking about the nature of the day and night, the sun, the daytime, and all the cycles. The way Yom and Laila come about, they never rest; they continuously going. But we also learn from this Yom v'Layla lo yishbaisu that people shall never rest. But day and night they should not rest, not have the inyan of Shabbos. Since it says lo yishbaisu v'amar mar, and Mar said that as horish alohen zuhi misoso, that when akum are warned, they're told lo yishbaisu, and they violated, that's misoso. So since the pasuk says v'yom v'laylo lo yishbaisu, and they rest, akum sheshavas is chayiv misa. What does it mean? Akum sheshavas, in Pashtus, it means if he rests on Shabbos, the day of rest that is for Yid. But the Noch is the Gemara Meisif. The Gemara adds, Amar Ravina, Ravinus adds, Afilu Sheni b'Shabbos. Even on Monday, Sheni b'Shabbos. Even if he rests on Monday. What does that mean if he rests on Monday? So Rashi explains, well, Rashi is mefarish, as Ravina is mechadish, as the Azhora lo yishbaisu, that Ravina is coming up in addition to what we've said before in the Gemara, Akum Sheshavas, even b'Sheni, is nidlosh b'Shabbos shu yom shvis al Yisrael. It's not only if a goy, an Akum rests on the resting day of a Yid, he rests on the seventh day of the week on a Shabbos, or Echad b'Shabbos sheshivsim b'Hanoitzim, or he is resting on the Sunday, which is the rest day for the Noitzrim, nor menucha ba'alma ka'osar lehu, but he is just prohibiting them resting, period. Any kind of rest. It's on a Monday, it doesn't matter. It's not a holiday. It's not a day of rest. Not for the Yid, not for the Goyim. Yet there is a prohibition against a akum to rest there. Amar lehu osna menucha ba'al koslu. Shalo yivatlu mimolocha. They should not waste time from working. Vafilu yoim she'enu bar shvisa. Even in a day which is not a resting day, they are not allowed to. Resting, vacation is not allowed for akum. That's how Rashi translates even on a Monday, meaning not only on Shabbos and not only on Sunday, but resting b'chlal. Now, according to this pshat and Rashi, the issue with the pasuk, what the Gemara is talking about, is just the whole idea of resting should not take place. Lo yishbaisu. Nothing to do with a day of rest, a kedushas, yom tov, and things like that. It only has to do with not doing work. Okay, so that the Rebbe will explain has a connection to day and night in the simple context that all the constellations, the movement of the sun and the moon and everything else, that it keeps on going. So that's understood how that connects. But we'll see now that in the Rambam, it's not an issue of not work that's an issue over here. Over here, the issue is making a holiday, a day of rest. To rest day. The Rebbe is going to ask, why is the Torah against a goy making a day of rest, especially a Shabbos? And this is a zeicher for the creation of the world. Why should the goyim not be allowed? Let's look inside. For Rambam, Ober is mashma. From the Rambam, however, it appears as the isur for shvisa b'nei Noach afilu b'yomi mesachel, that this prohibition of resting, that b'nei Noach are not allowed to rest on a weekday, is dik mitzadem bos menucha ba'alma ka'asalu. It's not because of the issue that Hashem is prohibiting them, the Pasuk is prohibiting them, menucha in general. They should be working and not resting. That's not an issue of not doing work. Norval ein manichin oisom l'chadesh das. As the Rambam says, we don't allow for them to come up with a religion, belasis mitzvahs la'atzmam medaiton, and to make for themselves, on their own opinion, make themselves mitzvahs. They made themselves a mitzvah to rest in a day. So there's an issue because they made it into a religion. The riber is their din from akum sheshavas afilu b'yem mesachel. That's why we have the akum sheshavas even a weekday chayiv misa, because they made themselves a day of rest, a new religion. It's not because they should be working just for the day of working, as Rashi says. So the prohibition is only if they make it into a Shabbos, into a day of rest. Therefore, is moving. So from this we understand. As loit shitas Rambam meintlo yishbeisu. According to Rambam, what does it mean? They shall not rest. B'nei Noach tornit hiten Shabbos. That they're not allowed to observe Shabbos. Or that I feel talking Shabbos, or even make another day like Shabbos. But it's all they're making it into a day of rest. Not that they're not working, but it's specifically to make a Shabbos, a day of rest. So according to the Rambam, we need to understand what is the shayches from the Razhore. So what's the connection between this warning that we say as the Bnei Noach Tornit Shabbos, that they're not either allowed to observe our Shabbos, the 7th day of the week, or that Afilu Machan Ander Tokum Shabbos, or they're not allowed to even make another day which would be like a Shabbos for them. So how is that connected with that the Pasuk says that Yom V'Layla Lo Yishboisu, that they keep on going, Kipshute. As es wird nicht sein, kim bitul behefsik, in Sidre and Hogos Oilom, there's not going to be, in the Pshat and Posik Lo Yishboisu, there is not going to be no stopping and no interruption in Sidre and Hogos Oilom, in the order, the way the world is conducted. Zera v'kotzir goymer v'yom v'laylo. So, Bish loima loit pirush Rashi. We understand the Rambam is hard because the Rambam says it's a Shabbos idea over here, a day of rest, to make it either our Shabbos or make another Shabbos. So what's the connection with the simple meaning that nature will continue? Doesn't seem to be connected. According to Rashi, that you always have to work, there's a connection, because just like the days of the week, the day itself is always no change in nature. One shouldn't change and stop certain days to work. It's understood according to Rashi as menucha ba'al makashalu. Just in general, he is prohibiting them not to do work, not to waste from doing melacha. It's verstandig. There's Zusammenhang. Then we understand the connection between the Beidin Yonim from Lo Yishboisu, between these two aspects of not stopping, which means as vet needs zayin, there won't be no interruption, and therefore there should not be no resting and interruption. Rashi Elaine is mefarish, and as Rashi himself explains, as when the pasuk sagt lo yishboisu, but tzitzich nit lo yisud zex itim, that when it says they will not cease, isn't just talking about the 6 times the seasons. Zera v'kotzir v'goymer, the 6th season mentioned the time that you sow, the time that you cut, and the other seasons, as in Zevet nit zayin can bittul v'hefsek, that there will be no interruption, no stopping and no interruption. But the same thing would apply to the humans. As by is only also by them there should be no resting of work. So according to Rashi, we understand the correlation between the person, the people, not to stop to work. As opposed to the opinion of Rambam. What is the warning? When it says what does it mean? It doesn't mean to stop or wasting from working, nor as his own need bashtimen, just that they should not designate a day that it should be a day of rest. Is kosher. So that we don't know, that's difficult to understand. What is the shaykhs for not that hazhora? What's the connection from that warning with Pashtus from the Yishbaisu with the simple idea that they will not cease from Zerav Kotzir Gaimer, Zerav Kotzir, etc. So the Rebbe wants to know why Takeh? Why? What is the connection that since there's going to be a continuous cycle of nature, that's why they can't make a Shabbos? What's the connection? The Rebbe is going to bring also the Medrash, which also seems to go along with the Rambam versus Rashi, with a little distinction. But also, and the Rebbe is going to ask the same question, according to the Medrash, which also seems to prohibit making a Shabbos. Why? What's the connection? Why would it prohibit Goyim make for them a Shabbos when the whole concept of Shabbos seems to be something which also the Goyim should be involved, believing in Hashem, in the creation of the world? That's the whole idea of Shabbos. They used to create the world in 6 days, and they rested on the Shabbos base. The limud anal from Lo Yishbaisu, the above learning that we learned from the Lo Yishbaisu, in Medrash from Posik, it's also brought on the Medrash, on the verse, Hashem nosan lechem HaShabbos. See, and he gave the mon over there to the Yidden, and the Yidden violated, and they collected. So he says, see, Hashem gave you the Shabbos. So what does the Medrash say? Zelashena Medrash. So this is the language that the Medrash says there. Lochem nitno v'loy la'akum. Hashem gave it to you, and not to the Goy. Kan Omru. From here, Hashem just tell us, Im yavoyu akum v'yishmru es HaShabbos. If Goyim come and they keep the Shabbos, loy dayom she'enom mekablim. It's not sufficient that she'enom mekablim schar ela shechayovim misa. But on top of that, they will be liable for death. Shenemar. So a goy that doesn't keep Shabbos doesn't get the reward. Not only that, says the Medrash, but they'll also be liable for Misa. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "V'yoyim v'laylo lo yishbaisu," and that day and night they shall not rest, and they should not, therefore, there as hores of Misa, as the one before. And also the pasuk says that Shabbos is Beini Uvein Bnei Yisrael. It's just between me and the Jewish people, the Bnei Yisrael. And the mother says, Moshe Lemelech Yoshev, Umatruna Yoshev Eskenegda. It's an example. You have a king sitting, and you have the queen sitting opposite him. One who goes in between them is Chayiv. The Eberster, the king, and the Yid, the queen, are keeping Shabbos. Is between the two of them. If a goy passes through them, by meaning he starts to keep Shabbos, then it's Chayiv Misa. He'll be Chayiv. So over here, Rebbe brings out that even though this Medrash talks specifically about Shabbos, doesn't say any weekday or a Sunday or a Monday or something else, as we brought down from the Gemara. But yet, there's no reason to say that the Medrash disagrees with that, even though it talks specifically about Shabbos. Hagamas, the Medrash, forbidden lo yushboisu by akum nidru kavayinos lachemes Shabbos. He associates, he ties it to this prohibition against not resting with Hashem is giving the Shabbos, which talks specifically about Shabbos. From deswegen is the muchrach, yet we don't have to say ados is amachloikis mit shas, that this is a disagreement with the Gemara, which prohibits the akum celebrating any other day as a Shabbos. Nor as dos was lachem ditna v'loy la'akum, that's given to you and not for the akum. Doesn't mean only the actual Shabbos, the seventh day of the week. Nit blois them talk for Shabbos. Doesn't only mean the day of Shabbos. Yom HaShvi, not oich, but also means them inyan from Shabbos. So you have Shabbos and not a goy doesn't have Shabbos and Akum doesn't have Shabbos, whether it's Yom HaShvi or another day. Whichever day it will be. So basically, the Rebbe wants to say that the Medrash can fit the Gemara, but it's certainly, the Rebbe was saying that he has, the Medrash is talking about the observance of a Shabbos and not just resting, as Rashi explained it. Loidem is Mubah, but it's understood as Ladas HaMedrash, Bashtei der Isur von Akum Sheshabas, that according to the Medrash, what does the prohibition of an Akum resting, not just because he's resting, so that they don't waste. They shouldn't rest, not to waste from not doing work, should always be working. That's Rashi, as Rashi's opinion. Not in them, as a Toranit Machon Atok Shabbos Kidas Rambam. But what we're talking about is that they're not allowed to make a day like Shabbos, like the Rambam. So it's a Shabbos day. The Rebbe says, even a Monday, they're not making a Shabbos day, or a Shabbos day itself. So, what is the difference between the Medrash and the Rambam? Nor as is do achilik zwischen Shittas Rambam und das Medrash, there is a distinction between the Rambam's view and the Medrash view. Like the Rambam is that Isur to halten atokim Shabbos. What is the prohibition of holding a day of Shabbos mitzad them? Because we don't allow them to come up with new religions and to do mitzvahs. So the prohibition is against coming up with a religion. That's the reason. Medrash, as opposed to going to the Medrash, is as the reason why we don't let them do it was that Inyan for Shabbos is because Shabbos was given only to Yidden and not to Bnei Noach. So we see that the Medrash has a specific objection of Shabbos by a goy. According to the Rambam, it's not so much a goy making Shabbos but it's because a goy is making a new religion. We don't want to make a new religion. According to the Medrash, it's very specifically because a Shabbos is only for a Yid and not for a Goy, not because of religion. So we have to understand why. That verstehen of them Medrash, also the Medrash, we have to understand it's going to be an additional question to what we learned before. Noitziv with the Shaila Nasif Aleph. In addition to the question that we asked on the Rambam, what is the Shayches zwischen dem Isur zu machen a Shabbos Tag mit Leish Beisu Kipshutei? What is the connection? Here we have a provision for a Goy making a Shabbos day with what we learn in the Pasuk Leish Beisu, literally, which means that nature will continuously go. So what is the connection? We have another issue here. Here we have an issue. Why is there such an objection for a Goy to make a Shabbos? For us is there inyan for Shabbos as a mushlo from Bnei Noach? Why is the concept of Shabbos so negated, taken away, so rejected that Bnei Noach? Bis as a Torah nish bashtimen afil another Torah Shabbos, to the extent that they're not allowed to designate even another day as Shabbos. On the contrary, if you look where Shabbos comes around, it's not a Jewish thing. Shabbos comes around the creation of the world, which is for everybody. The idea that God concluded on the seventh day the work that He did, and He rested on the seventh day, is this is not connected necessarily with you. Such as when going out of Egypt. Going out of Egypt was a Jewish issue. So therefore that's connected to Yid, understood. But Shabbos is creation of the world as not specifically connected to a Yid. Nor midabriya, that's connected to creation. So Shabbos should have had a connection also to the conduct of Bnei Noach. The din is but the din is just the opposite. It does not only have a connection, but the din is the opposite, as a Bnei Noach tornit abhitten the Shvisa from Shabbos. That a Bnei Noach is not allowed to keep the resting of Shabbos. To me is not aggressive. This surprise is even greater. Eden sein ungesagt geworden nicht zu tun, kein Melacha b'Shabbos. Eden were instructed not to do work on Shabbos for what purpose? So that we set it in our souls, set up the belief in the renewal of the world, that the world was renewed. As the world is not king Katman Chaz v'Sholom, that the world is not an earlier, God forbid, which is on its own, was always there. Like Hashem, the world is created. It's something which was not, and then it came into being. Somebody created it, Hashem. But it is Bashafen geworden von der Obersten. She was created by Hashem. Is about das Ben Noach is nicht nur darfen sie nicht outbieten Shabbos. So since we're saying Ben Noach, not only are they not supposed to keep Shabbos, nor is they totally outbieten, but they're not allowed to observe Shabbos. So it turns out as me is a Menaya that we're stopping them from believing in the renewal of the world. How could we say such a thing? The Rebbe is going to explain about the changes that take place in the world before the Mabul and after the Mabul, as the Rebbe explained in Ois Gimel and on. So now the Rebbe is going to explain how the Mabul changed things around, and that change around brought about the Lo Yishboisu from the way it was before the Mabul to after the Mabul, and the Akum are not shaykh to the higher level that the world experienced after the Mabul, and that belongs only to Bnei Yisrael, and that's why the Shabbos is davke for Bnei Yisrael, not for the Akum, as the Rebbe will explain towards the end of the Sikha. But right now, the Rebbe goes on to explain what exactly happened before the Mabul and after the Mabul. Where on one hand, we say that the world has become stronger. Lo yishbeisu. Beforehand, there could be a stop. The Eibishter wanted to erase and get rid of the order of the Sheishis Mebreshis. And then the Eibishter said after the Mabul, no, Oid Kol, the Kayitz or that the nature will continues to be all the time. So we see that the world became stronger after the Mabul. And yet we find a lacking in the world, because while people before the Mabul lived for many, many years, after the Mabul they lived less. Why is that? The Rebbe is going to explain that actually, as we'll see in Nois Daled, that it really comes from the same Nekuda. Let's do inside. Gimel. Vetmenes verstehen behagdim will understand it by introducing, as in dem Shinu was is geworden in Welt noch Mabul, that in the change that took place in the world after the flood, the Gabe dem is given freer relative to the way it was before the Mabul, gefindment zwei Ktsoves, we find two extremes. Von ein Seite Zetman, on one hand we see, as noch Mabul had die Welt bekommen, after the Mabul, the world got the Haftocha, the promise, but it's not only a promise, but that actually b'meila them toikif from the yishbeisu. It got the force that it will never stop. World will continuously be without stopping. Was there toikif in olam? This strength in the world is not something that was before. It's a sofa the chidush legabe the matzav olam. That's an addition. It's a novelty relative to the situation of the world where it is given mitzad his havusay, as it was from the creation. Vor mitzad that his havus from the creation perspective, hagam as vayar elikim eskol asher osovin. Although Al-Kim saw that everything that he did, and it was very good. So to begin with, everything was good, but yet that could have ended. He says, given it an oifun, but it still was in such a way, as he can zainus is given, that when there is sins, it was able to be, and it actually happened. I have to consider there was an interruption in the orders of the world. As the Pasuk says, Vaynochem Hashem, God sort of considered, he regretted, that he made man and he said that he will erase man. So there will be a change in the world as it was created. But after the flood, or the Eibishter geschworen, Hashem swore after the Unkoides, it is given, and he formed a covenant. As in Vos Faranoifen and Hoges when the Odom Zon Nitzain, that no matter in whatever situation humans conduct themselves, that Mer Nitzain can have Sekubitl and Sidra Olam, there will never be anymore an interruption and a negation in the orders of the world. That means the world became a stronger place. Von der zweite Seite gefunden, but on the other side, we find as noch Mabul is geworden nachalisches in the world. That after the Mabul, there became a weakness in the world. Dugma, and as an example, B'Sheina Rambam, to use the Lashon, the language of the Rambam, as Adam Mabul hoyimei boirach, up till the flood, they lived long. Zid the Mabul is holchu yemoisim holav v'chaser, and after the Mabul, the days went and became less holav v'chaser. So why is that? What does this mean? So Dalet, the beer in them. Bald as the Welt is bashafen geworden b'shvil haTorah. since the world was created for the Torah, to the extent Hashem formed a covenant, made a condition with the creation of the world. If the world will accept the Torah, it says that it all hinged on the Shishi, on the 6th day of Sivan, when the Yidden got the Torah. Otherwise, he would turn the world back into chaos. So it's all hinged. The Torah was created for the world was created for Torah. Was there Eiftuv Matan Torah? What did the Matan Torah accomplish? What was the novelty? Is the Kishur fun Elyonim und Tachtonim. That is to tie together the ones above and the ones below. The Riber hat in Welt gedarf sein Elyonim und Tachtonim. So therefore, in the world, there needs to be the upper and the lower, so that later on, so in order that later on, B'shas Matan Torah, during the time of Matan Torah, that connection took place, Aniyah Maschil, in which there's a kishur from Al Yonim Vayered Hashem, when Moshe Amar Alei, there's a kishur from up, lower, and the upper. But not only actually Matan Torah, starting from the 2000 year Shnei Alofim Torah, after the first 2000 years, then they started 2000 years Torah. So the Ribra in Welt gedarf sein El Yonim und Tachtonim. So there needed to be El Yonim Tachtonim, which is also by we'll see also in the world in that period from the office. Bichdei as der noch Shas Matan Torah und noch früher der Tkufa Shnei Torah was da hat sich angefangen der Achone zu Torah, in which we started the preparation for Torah, soll sich öfton der Verbund von den zwei Bechines Shabaylam. The two levels within the world, El Yonim und Tachtonim, that the El Yonim and Tachtonim should connect as a preparation. And El Yonim and Tachtonim, as a Tachtonim Yalu El Yonim, El Yonim Tachtonim, the upper should go down to the lower. So there were Tachtonim before, a lower level, and there was also upper in the world, but there became a change in the level of the Tachtonim. Und in die zwei Beginnes in Welt ist given Hashimi von Koidem Hamabel und Lacher Hamabel. And in these two levels in the world, there was a change, the way the world was before and after the Mabel. Koidem Hamabel is the Welt Bechlolus. Before the Mabel, the world in general, given in the Matzav, Vizi is Mitzad Lamaila. That was the way it was from above. Or Noach Mabel, Vizi is Mitzad Lamata. And after that, it was as below, as was explained. So basically, the world had El Yonim. That is the way the world is before the Mabel. And then the world has Tachtonim. That is the way the world was after the Mabel. And that's the connection, the El Yonim, that before and after the Mabul is the prelude. That's the Hakdama to the El Yonim V'Tachtonim that was Nischaber based Matan Torah and the 2000 years of Torah preceding the actual Matan Torah. And the Rebbe brings now to explain how the Mato, how there was a refinement and there was an elevation in the Tachtonim after the Mabul relative to before the Mabul. That before the Mabul it was Elyonim, and after the Mabul it was Tachtonim. And the Rebbe brings from the Keshes, from the cloud, from the rainbow that's in the cloud, that only after the Mabul there was as Kashti Nosati Ba'onin, there is a cloud, rainbow in the cloud. But what happened before? That's a natural phenomenon. What does it mean as Kashti Nosati Ba'onin? And the Rebbe explains that there was a refinement while there was the ingredients beforehand, the sun and the clouds and how a rainbow forms, but yet because of the materialism, it did not come out in a cloud. The circumstances became possible for this rainbow. Let's look inside. Hey, of course, this takes place after Matan Torah. So we say that Hashem says, I placed my rainbow in the cloud. That becomes as a sign of my covenant between me and the earth. That is after the Mabul. So the Meforshim ask, Keshes is the Chadovar TV. Rainbow is a natural phenomenon. As wird davon, how does a rainbow take place? Was the Sonnenstrahlen spiegeln sich up, the shine of the sun, the rays of the sun reflect auf a bestimmten Eufen in a designated way from the Anonim, from the cloud. So there is a reflection from the cloud when the rays of the sun hit the cloud in a certain way. From the Anonim, how could this be a sign of a covenant when this is a natural phenomenon? They answer Odi Teva Gufa, that this actual nature, as the Karne Hashemesh and the Anonim, that the rays of the sun and the clouds, so that they should be in this specific situation, was damals, spiegeln sich die Strahlen ab von der Anonim, then the rays reflect from the clouds in the shape of this rainbow. Of the Eibishter geschaffen noch am Mabul. The Eibishter created that circumstance after the Mabul. That becomes the sign of the covenant, the Keshes Nosati Ba'onin. Koidem HaMabul is that Avir Ha'olam Geven Mer Chumri. Prior to the flood, the air in the world was more materialistic. Und der Riber seinen Euch der Anonim, and therefore also the clouds, was werden von Eid Yalmen Oretz, that form from the cloud that comes up from the earth. Eid Yalmen Oretz Lashkis, given mer chumri, they were more materialistic. Und sie haben nicht gekannt aufnehmen und aufspiegeln. They could not accept and reflect the Meir HaShemesh, the light of the sun. Der Far is damot nit given the Metzias from Keshes. That's why then there was no existence, there was no phenomenon as a rainbow. Only after which the world in general became refined, also the clouds became more refined. Nicht azoy gedicht, they were not so thick. Bis zeitenweise, to certain times, if azoy feel to such an extent, as they spiegeln up the gabnim from Oir HaShemesh, that they reflect the various colors from the light of the sun. this physical phenomenon also is associated with the spiritual phenomenon. The same thing is also in the spiritual matter of these concepts. Farun Mabu is that Olam given Bishval Hamadregen. Before the flood, the world was on a very low step. Biz as loy hoyo shayich birur, to the extent that you could not sort it out. Unsulib them is given their mabul. That's why there was the flood, the tahev esoretz, to purify the land, because people could not do it. It was too low, and it could not be verified. So you need the flood to retire, so that it will allow for the service of sorting it out. Und der Fahr is der Keshes an Ois Bris Beni Ben Ba'oretz. That's why the rainbow becomes a sign of the covenant between me and the land. Weil durchun Keshes drickt sich Ois, because through the rainbow expresses the Tarev Zichuch was geworden in Oretz, the purity and the refinement that became in the land. That's why the Keshes, because the Keshes refinement is what gives it the rainbow, and that is the refinement that comes to the world, into the earth. Oizvov, darf man verstehen. So we need to understand this. Der Mabul Teires Oretz is doch gekommen nor zu lieb dem. Why was the Mabul that came to clean the earth? It only came because the Deir HaMabul vat Shochas Oretz Goimer vat Imole Oretz Chomas, so that the earth was corrupted and the earth was full with robbery. The Baal Asgam Esa Oilam Nosan Belibam, which is Shalom. The world, Hashem, also placed it in the hearts of people, which means that people have an impact on the Oilam. Haben die Chatoim und die Bnei Odom Geirim given. So that caused, as Euch the Welt is geworden betachlis achumri, is that the world also became totally materialistic. Und od die Tuma, the chumris had the Mabel Rabbi. So this defilement, this materialism that came through the human causes, Oilam Nosum Belibam, or the Mabel Rabbi. But based on the above, as the Bezies from Keshes is geworden erst noch Mabel, that the Keshes became only after the flood, weil demult seinen die Anonim und der Oilam bechlal geworden edelen, because the clouds and the world in general became more refined. It turns out, as Durchun Mabu is the Welt, that it turns out that the world became purified, nit nor geworden rein. Von der Tumme v'hashchos v'der Mabu. Not only did it become pure from the defilement and the corruption of the generation of the flood, nor nizdache geworden mehr, but it became even refined more. This is given more than before the sin of their Mabul. So, in other words, that now we have a greater advantage after the Mabul in the world than what it was before. And it was even more than in the beginning of creation. Well, dann is doch nicht given ken keshes. Then there was no rainbow, was weiß of zichoil gnal, which points to the refinement of the worlds above. And after the Mabul there is. So it turns out that the Mabul brought in a level of refinement and an elevation which is even higher than when the world was created. How could that be? Zion. Is the beer in them? The explanation of this is Betchila Sabriya, when the world was in the beginning created, is the Schleimness von Welt given verbunden. So that wholesomeness that we say, Olam al Milui Nivra, the world was wholesome, complete, that wholesomeness from the world, that was tied nit mit the Teva Utchunas Mitzias from Welt Gufa, not with the nature and the characteristic of the existence of the world itself, nor mit der Eufem v'koyach von ihr Bashafen, but rather that wholesomeness came from this way and the power from its created, from its being created. Olam al Milui Nivra, the world was created with perfection fully. Der Bashafen, the Welt is in an Eufem von al Milui. The creation of the world is in a way that it's in its fullest. Aber as Welt mit Sido so kennen Zukunft zu Zichuch, but that the world from its side, from its perspective, should be able to reach refinement. Das hat sich aufgetan durch ein Mabel. That was accomplished through the flood. Der Eberster hat reingegeben an neue Yecholes utchune in Welt. Hashem gave in a new ability, a new characteristic in the world. Azi gufa zol kenen nizdacher v'nisalven, that she herself, the world itself, should be able to be refined and elevated. Und das ist der Tam, was Davke Demelt is nischadish geworden. This is the reason that it's specifically then that this was renewed, novelty came about, the Teva from Metzias Akesha, the nature of the existence of the rainbow. Hagam as der Keshes schafft sich durch die Karne Hashemesh und die Anonim zusammen, even though that the rainbow is created through the rays of the sun and the clouds together, so they both impacted. Is as ober beiker verbunden mit the anonym, but mainly it is tied to the anonym which come from below. That's the tach. Nit mit the karne hashemesh, not so much with the rays of the sun, b'chin hashemesh havaya, which is the level of Havai, the sun Havai, which is above. They are simple in their colors. You don't have this colorful. That's the Shemesh. That is reflects through the clouds. That's where the colors become. They become separated into the colors of the rainbow through the clouds that take place from the steam, from the coming up, was an oil von Aretz that go up from the earth, meaning that it's the mata, it's the low that makes the main part of the keshes. Und the Edim was einen oil von Eretz seinen beäufen besucher kazem. And these clouds that come from the earth are refined in such a way as in Zezel, that in them should be reflected the light of the sun. The bald as the tchune von Zichel Ha'oretz, as Welt Gufa soll haben die Efshoretz von Zichel Va'aliyah. Since this characteristic of refinement of the earth, that the world itself should have the possibility of refinement elevation, is nischadish geworden la'achrei hamabul, that was renewed after the flood, that the earth, the sichuch comes from below. The far is dafke Dann given der Inyan from his kashin asati bonim. That's why then Hashem put the rainbow in the cloud because of that refinement. That Ebershtot and eingegeben in Onon, Hashem gave into the cloud v'shavtzich from Oretz, which is created from the earth, the Inyan from Keshes. He made the idea of the rainbow. Das haste, which means as there the aid yalim in ha'oretz, that when the cloud comes up from the ground, zol zayin v'oifem mezuchach, it should be in a refined way, as in them zol zich onzen der Hashemesh, so that the light of the sun can be realized, seen in those clouds. So this is the part that was accomplished through the Mabul, the new characteristic that the bottom, that the Tachtonim in of themselves can be refined and elevated. And that's why when the Keshes came in, because based on the above, will be more understood. Farvos der Rotzen ha'elyen was given b'tchila. How come? Why that supreme will, which was in the beginning, to Bashafim developed to create the world, was not strong enough to overcome Hashem's desire to want to erase. Und euch das vayar lekim to vayar lekim as kol hashanos v'netoimoid. Hashem saw everything that He created that was very good. When He completed completed the creation, so everything was in place. How come that wasn't sufficient? To hold back the decree, Hashem says, "I will going to erase." Then says Gevoren Rabbis Roas Odom Ba'oretz that there was an increase of bad of the person in the land. And then, but after the Mabul, that didn't matter. The Eibishter disregarded the Ras Odom. Achrei Mabul, or the Eibishter Kedes B'Rizkiven. After the flood, Hashem formed a covenant as a Filev and the Welt that Zainin Amatzav. That even when the world will be in a situation, was Vetarush Ruf de Machshava, which is going to call out that thought, lahavi choyshev va'avadim la'ilam, to bring darkness and loss to the world because of Rabbi Roas Odom. From deswegen le'ikoris kabosar going back, the problem will be no cut. Why is that? How is this change with Matan Torah? That before Matan Torah, Rabbi Roas Odom was going to bring to destruction, and Hashem's creation in full did not stop that. And after the Mabul, yes. The Baal does was Olam al Miruluya Nivra. Because as we said before, since the fact that the world was created fully on its fullest and its wholesomeness, is given mitzad dem oifim v'zayin b'shafim, that came about because the way it was created, the way it was created through the Creator, nit mitzad toichem von oilam gufa, but not because of the content of the world itself. Therefore, the sins developed their weiter from Beirun sein Rotzen, which distant the world, those sins distant the world from the Creator and His will. They caused the descent to such an extent, such a way, as is only given, shaykh kol kach, that it wasn't so applicable, his own misbarer and his alaven, that she should be sorted out and elevated. The Baal does the Ruchet for the Ramabel is developed as if from this calculator. Since through this sin of the Ramabel, the world was so ruined. To the extent that the world was full with robbery, from the perspective from the world itself, there was not yet the possibility to sort of elevate. It was before as before the perspective that the people, the world itself should be able to elevate. Thus is This is also an inner reason. Was the Tochacha from Noach and sein Warnung? How come the rebuke that Noach gave to the people of his generations and his warnings that HaKadosh Baruch Hu meiva leichem es hamabel, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the mabel, but that der hamabel nit meire given to tshuva, that did not arouse, did not awaken the generation of the flood to tshuva. They ignored Noach's warning because there was no possibility for the world itself of sorting out an elevation. So when they were so distant, there was nothing how to bring them back. The riber is nit arblibun came tam of irmitzi. So therefore, there was no more reason for the existence of the world. Hashem ki Adam goimer. Hashem reconsidered, retracted for making man. Vayomer goimer He says, I will erase them. Durch the Yerida from Welt, if the Weitigung from beide, because through the descent of the world and its distancing from its creator, is von ihr Nistale geworden aus Nabeda. So it was removed from it the will of the creator, so there's no more existence over there. That's why Hashem said Emcha. As opposed to after the flood, dan der Inyan von Tare Gufa, since then it was renewed, this idea of refinement, of purification and refinement in the world itself, which means as that also when it is in a very low level, in a situation which is degraded, very low, Zozi Ken is barness alban, still it can be sorted out and elevated. Idea but it's tshuva through the work of tshuva, through the parties then will given the Christus priest. Then that's why there was then the forming of the covenant. No flesh will be cut off. There will not be a mabel. In welchem matzav the welt will not sein. Any situation, there is always a way back through bringing the mata back and elevating. Now, that the Noach verstehen, based on the Bible, understand that the tzveik tzovas anal, these two extremes that took place, the Rebbe pointed out that the world became stabilized after the flood, never to be a flood again, and also the fact that the life was shortened. Was in Welt lachar hamabel, that was a kind of the word after the flood. Mitzad echad, on one hand, the toikef of lo yishbeisu, that it will never stop. The world will always continue to exist without stop. Either gives understand that their day keep on going unless. Then they need the they are not conflicting, they're not contradictory one to another, not adrab. But on the contrary, they come from the Zelba and they come from the same point. Was is nischadish geworden lachar hamabel, that has come to be, that has been the novelty that came after the flood. Der kiyum ha'olam mitzabdem lamato, which is, the point here is the existence of the world from this perspective of the below. Koidem hamabel is the ishavus and kiyum ha'olam. Before the mabel, the creation and the existence of the world given mitzad rotzin abayda, that came from above because of that was the wishes of the Creator. Mitzad chofetz chesed, he wanted kindness. Hashem is a chofetz chesed, so that's why there was a world. But but after this novelty, when the world was clean, the Eibishter brought in this new characteristic in the world, that the Taras of Mabul is that Eibishter is ständig mahave mekayim. So the Eibishter creates her constantly, not from his rotzen, only mekayim mitzad irinyan, mitzad atare vazichuch shabo, because of the tare and the refinement which is in the world itself. And that point, is the that's the same point, which is the reason for these two extremes. Mitzad echad, on one hand, the bald as the Welt Gufe is geworden roi as der Eberster, since the world itself became fitting, that Hashem, welcher is loishin is who didn't change, soll ihr Mekayim sein, that Hashem should sustain it, is the Riber Irkiyim by Leish Baisu. That's why it's in a sustained in a way without stop. For the zweite Seite, on the other hand, those Gufa was noch Mabu, is the Eberster Mekayim developed mitzad Irinyan. The fact that Hashem is creating, sustaining the world because of the world, the matter of the world, is the Riber Irkiyim Machalishis. That's why the existence is in a weak way. In a Eifel von Hochu, your Muslim Holag that they're dying and going less. Because that's the measure of Nivroim. It's Hashem, but Hashem as it's measured by Nivroim. Not like before the Mabul was rebelled as the Kiyim Ha'olam Dan is given mitzad Chaznish LaKadosh Baruch Hu. Since the world's existence then was because of Hashem's kindness, is Hoyumein Ba'irach. They had long life. There stated Tikkun Zoyar, as it says in the Tikkun Zoyar, as dos was is given dan arichos yomim. Why was there long life then, long days? Is valdam shoch is that given from the rachapayim arichampim, because the hamshocha was drawn down from the level of erachapayim arichampim. But when it comes because of the world, from the perspective, that's shortened to the measures of the world. But because it's Hashem's involvement, that stays all the time. The zwei Tkufas, these two periods, the Tkufa from Koidem HaMabel, the period that was before the Mabel, and the Welt is given Viziz Mitzad Lamal, when the world was the way it is from above. And the Tkufa Shel Achar HaMabel, and then the period which was after the flood, when the Welt is given Viziz Mitzad Lamato, when the world was as it is from its low, from below, Zayin and given Kenal Sidalid, they were, as said before, Hagdome, that was introduction to the Dritter Tkufa, to the third period. So you had one before the Mabel, one after the Mabel, and the third period, Shnei Alof and Torah. When it started as a preparation of Matan Torah, the Kishur from Elyonim and Tachtoinim, the tie from the upper and the lower. This is also the explanation that we find this phenomenon on the 2,000 years, which includes the Ovis. So we find that Avram V'Soram Geborn Yitzchok Dafkin Zere Elter Yom. So they gave birth in their old age. Avram 100 years and Sarah 90 years. Avram was 100 and Sarah was 90. One of the meat because that way was expressed the kishur from the tzvei tkufas anal. That represented the tie of these two seasons. The period from before Mabul and after the Mabul expressed itself in that, because even though Avram Nismatu Hashonim, the years were already diminished, noch mehr wie in the Asar Derish more than the 10th generation of Avraham, and they became less. So with them was Dam Shochadan is given nit from Bechinas Erech HaPayim, because then it wasn't from the level of Erech HaPayim, was his Hecher from Welt, as it says, like Dikam Erech HaPayim. So it was not from that higher level at the time of Avram, like it was before Avram, like from Noach to Avram, nor from Namadregi was Leferach HaElemes. That was from a level which is relative to Elemes. Afal became so. As the years go, they lived lesser. They lived less years, like after the Mabul, in which it was a lesser years. Afal became Yitzchok in the elder, but yet the birth was in the old age. This is given the Seder Mabul, as it was the order before the Mabul. When the Amshach is given from Bechinas Erech HaPayim, when the Amshach came from the Erech HaPayim. So they took the age they gave, their age's life was short, but when they gave birth was like before the Mabul. Und der Kishur von der zweiten Kufas und Matzobim Shaboilam, and the connection of these two periods and situations in the world, from an Elyonim and Tachtonim, to tying the upper and the lower before the model and after the model, is Gekumen Begoli and Lidus Yitzchak that came openly when Yitzchak was born. The Erster geborn als Yid, the first one was born as a Jew, was born of him Mekabel Gwen the Torah. His sons received the Torah when he's geborn bepoyel, when it happened in actuality, the Kishu from Oyen Mitachtonim, when there was the tie from the upper and the lower. But in this case, it was just represented by the first Jew in the age when he was born and in the age of people, what they lived at that time. Yud Aleph. In order for Yidden to be able to tie and connect the world in Elikus to the level in godliness which is hecher from Welt which is higher than the world is the Welt b'shafen geworden melchatchila in Azah Oifen. So the world was created in such a way as in sich euch der Inyan Hashvisa from Melechas Abriya from the Welt, that it also has this idea, the stopping of the creations of the world. The Rashi sagt in Posuk Vaychal Elikim B'Yem as Rashi says when it says that Elikim Hashem finished on the seventh day. What was the world lacking after the 6 days of creation? It was Menucha, Bos Shabbos, 6 days of creation. So then Shabbos comes, Bos Menucha, that comes relaxation. It was finished and completed the Melacha. As the Melechas Habriya from the Sheshis Mebreshis, that the work of creation of the 6 days of Bereshis hat sich nicht verändert mit Bashafen the Metzias from Welt has not yet been completed when the existence of the world was created. Nor mit der Menucha, when you rest mit Metzias, with not existence. Was in ihr ist reingegeben geworden durch der Shvisa from Melechas Habriya, which was brought into the world through the resting from Bria, was given into the world that other aspect, the aspect of not creation, non-creation in the creation. From the erste Woche, and since every week repeats itself, the same ideas that took place in the very first week of creation for Shivas Mebreshis, the river wird jeder Shabbos nimshich in Welt der Inyan HaMenucha. So therefore, on every Shabbos we have in the world the idea of Menucha. That was inherently created in the world and repeats itself. The idea of non-work within the creation. The Shabbos is hecher von alle 6 Tagen in the Bria Shabbat. Since this concept, the idea of resting on Shabbos, is higher than all the 6 days, and the creation that's in the 6 days, the real creation, the action of creation from Metzias, so I don't think this in the world. Welt is nicht kein Kele to them, but the world is not really a vehicle to receive the Shabbos. Become Mekoimus, as explained in many places. Shabbos is the Shabbos is the level which is higher than time. The river wird nimshach der Inyan HaMenucha. Therefore, how do we bring down the Menucha in the world in a recognizable, in a revealed way? Not in Pnimis Olam. It's only in the inner world. You can tell that it's Shabbos, but in the world it's the you can't sell. But in Chitzonis Olam is the kentik echilik to Shabbos in Meichel. But in the externality, you can't see a difference. You can't tell a difference between Shabbos and the weekdays. Nigeria Eden was a tune auf dem Verbund von Welt, Tachtoinen, mit Hecher von Welt Aljonim, as it relates to Eden, which accomplish that connection from the world, which is Tachtoinen, with the higher von Aljonim. Wird bazei begilui the Eir from Shabbos Euchav Zer Metzias. So they openly also, the light of Shabbos has an impact on their existence. Do as it's known, as the Neshama Yiseda was a Nimshach b'Shabbos, that extra soul that is drawn down on Shabbos, poiled Ashinui, that impacts a change. Oichem the Teva of Nefesh Habamis, also the nature of the Nefesh Habamis. So there is a impact even the Chitzonis, the Yid can connect it. Was the Fad is Oichan HaMaoretz nit Meshaker b'Shabbos. Even a person who is not learned, doesn't lie on Shabbos, can trust him with regards to various tithing that he's taking care of it. We believe him on Shabbos because there's an impact in the Chitzonis and Nefesh Habamis from the Nefesh Elikis, from the Neshama Yisrael. Unafilin that Teva the Uva Gashmi, this impacts even the nature of the physical body. As opposed to as it pertains to the world in general, that is mugderin geder from zman amokim. Since it is defined in the definitions of time and place, was is verbundun mit that is connected with movement. The opposite is menucha, that's from relaxation. It's doing. So in the world, it cannot shine openly in menucha. So the 6 days of the week with Shabbos is the same. Don't see a difference. Which Shabbos is higher than Manamokim, but you can't bring that down into the world. Only by a Yid that can have that impact. Gimel, das is der Tam, was the Indian for Shvisa Shabbos is Muslim Ben. That's also the reason why the idea of resting Shabbos is negated, is rejected from a Ben Noach. You can't do it. For this reason, he is not allowed to make another day of the weekdays into a Shabbos. The Kavonas Habriya, the intent of the creation is as the Welt, the intention of the creation is that the world, which is also the human being who is part of the world, so Zayin Chosel Menucha should not be resting, should be lacking resting. So Zayin Eichen der Seder, that should also be in the movement of work, should always be working. That is created to the existence of time and place of the world. Which was created in the work of creation, the 6th day of creation. The 6th day of creation is meant to constantly be movement, work. And in that world, the Yidden should bring in the Menucha of Shabbos, was his Hecher from Metzias Ha'olam, which is higher from the world, from the existence of the world. The Rebbe B'Shasa, Ben Noach ended sein Eufen on Haga. When a Ben Noach changes his conduct that is placed from the Bria, the mitvos will oifton, with the fact that he wants to accomplish, to make up, in Welt the meaning for Shabbos, to bring Shabbos into the world, it's a chayv misa. It's a chayv misa. He loses his existence. But this is hepech hakavona, so welcher is mashafik. This is contrary, opposite of the intent what he was created. He's not supposed to bring in Shabbos into the weekday. He's supposed to be the weekday, supposed to work. Mashen Kenayid brings in the Shabbos into the Bria. This is also the reason was the Azhore to Bnei Noach, that the warning to Bnei Noach is his own nit bashtimen atogal Shabbos, that they should not designate a day as the Shabbos is ungedeited in Leish Boisu. It is pointed out in when it says Leish Boisu Moseret Kipshutoi, which speaks literally when we look at it like the Stam Shvisa talks about generally resting for Zerav Kotzir, sowing Karim Gomer. Unidveg Shvisa al Shabbos, now discussing about Shabbos. But those was bnei Noach seine Mushel from Shabbos, because the reason that bnei Noach are negated from Shabbos kommt als Titzor von der Yishbeisu, the negated sex eating. That comes as a result from the not resting as far as it relates to the 6 seasons. Since after the Mabul, Hashem set up the Welt as is designed in the Toikev HaMetzias, that should have the force of existence. These the that it should be never resting. That's the accomplishment after the Mabul. The Riber, therefore, Torn, the Brenech, with the Reinbringen in Ir, the Minyan Abu. That's why they're not permitted to bring into it the concept of Ligbul Hecher from Mitzias from Shabbos. That's higher than Shabbos, Baldosis, Betir, Stira, because that is contradiction to Toikev HaMetzias from Welt, to the force of the Metzias of the world, where there's no change. So you can't go ahead and change that, because only a Yid is empowered to bring down the level of El Yonim into the Tachtoin. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Noach Tovshin Chof Aleph and Tovshin Chof Dalet.